I'm speaking with Karl Hartman, who's the Managing Director of Gilshenan Imports. They're importers of lovely candle accessories, but also very high quality candles.
There's a few aspects with a candle. When you pick it up, generally a candle will be quite heavy, and which basically means it's made out of solid wax, where a cheaper candle, they may foam the wax, which will eventually mean that it's lighter.
So like you'd aerate an egg white or something like that, so you're selling a bit of air.
And you sort of sense that it's a bit light for its mass, you know, like it needs to be heavier, and they're candles that have been aired. The other thing with a good candle will have good fragrance. For instance, our candles have 4% fragrance, whereas the average for the market would be 1.5 to 2, and some even less. So
because I've at times picked up a candle and thought, oh, that's beautiful, and then you take it home and light it. And so it's the percentage of
the percentage of fragrance, like
of the fragrance in it.
Like this has got 4% in it. The tea lights, because of their nature, they've only got 3%. But you can't build a tea light with more fragrance. It starts to do the wrong thing, you know, and a wicks don't work. So, but generally, all our pillars and all our solid candles have that 4% fragrance, and that's been one of our points of interest in terms of the biggest thing people say that, oh my God, your candle actually works. Whereas a lot of candles that you'll burn at home that are scented, you won't get that scent throughout the house. It just goes away. And if they're old candles, an old cheaper candle, the actual fragrance will leach out the bottom anyway.
Is that right?
Yeah, well, if you have it, see that's white. It's got a white. If that's stained on the bottom of a candle, it means the fragrance is actually leaching into the paper. And
oh, I see.
Eh?
Well, that's an easy way to tell, isn't it?
Exactly.
And I've looked at candles like that, picked up, and it looks sort of almost greasy.
If there's grease on the bottom of the label, that's fragrance leaching out of the candle.
Oh, I see.
Which means it's not very well built.
No.
There's quite an art into building a candle. It has everything to do with the combination of acids, etc., that go in the wax, and also the wick, the size and diameter of the wick, because that candle is meant to burn out to that edge, as I explained before, in terms of you must light it to the edge every time when you light it first, because then it'll burn right down. And if you, for instance, this candle, if you burn that right to the edge of the first time, then just keep lighting it, it will just go down, 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 and keep folding on itself. In the end, you'll have a wafer about that high. Whereas generally with a cheaper candle, it'll burn out the side.
Yes.
Or burn one way, or it'll just, and the wax will flood all over the table. Whereas this thing, in the right circumstances, burnt the correct way, you will get the maximum amount of use out of it. You know, very often, like I said before, if you only burn it out to about 1/2 inch, and we have that small pool, the next time you light the candle, it will burn down that pool, that little hole.
And then you don't have a wick.
And then you don't have a wick.
Then you end up with a knife.
Yeah. Well, also people come back and say, this only burned for 4 hours.
Yeah.
But
I've done it.
But it's got to burn down the centre. And the other thing with a good candle,
So before you go on, the tip you gave me is that when you light a candle for the first time, you let it burn for 3 or 4 hours. 3 or 4 hours.
Till it burns to the edge.
That's
and
great.
if it doesn't burn to the edge, it's a cheap candle.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're not getting your value's worth, really.
No, well, see, this
if you
candle
pay half
burns
the price for it, and it only burns for 2-3 hours.
Well, this burns for 25 hours if it's burnt correctly. You know, so and so that's essentially the basics of a candle. We don't go to a trade fair in China and say, give me 100 of those or whatever. We actually have we don't buy candles from a trade fair. We have a dedicated factory in China that actually makes all these candles for us.
To your specifications,
to our specifications.
Your standards,
Yeah, because it's made in China, it takes a long time to develop a new product, because there's a lot of testing goes on, and there's always the back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. know, but so it does take a while. But when you've got your own dedicated factory, it's pretty good, because we're probably the biggest in terms of fragrance at our level, sort of wholesaler of candles in Australia. So we could keep a little factory going with just our stock. So.
And then you can maintain the quality and monitor the quality.
Yeah, well, we pride ourselves on our quality, and we don't get many complaints, and when we do, we're very keen. We'll get the stock back, and if we can't work it out, we'll send it to China and get them to work out why it happened. But very often it'll be something simple like they didn't burn it properly, or they put it in a wind. Or
I was going to say the only problem I've really had with good quality candles is when I put it in an area where it's getting a bit of a draft, and then it goes over on its side.
Everybody comes and asks you whether candles are drip proof. Well, most candles are a good candle inside a house, or in normal circumstances will burn down and it won't drip. But once you get any wind onto a candle, what happens is that you're fanning the flame with the wind. The flame's getting bigger, and you're burning more, you're melting more wax than you should be. You're melting more wax in the bowl than you should be, and the residue starts to fill up. There's more wax there than can actually be burnt, and the residue fills up, and sometimes it'll blow out the side, or it'll sometimes cut a hole when it gets too hot. Some candles burn down and they get too hot, they'll just burn outwards, and that just runs down the sides. There's a lot of little tricks to candles, but we, in our terms, we just keep it simple, stupid, just buy the paraffin wax, and paraffin is the cleanest burning wax.
One thing I want to ask you about, we talked briefly before about the fragrances, and I just wondered, how do you develop, how do you choose fragrances? How do you know what's going to work, what not's going to work? Well, and where do you get fragrances from?
Well, these are all essential. They're not natural. They're not essential oils. They're fragrant oils. So it comes from a large chemical factory, really. There's a UK company that has a facility in Hong Kong, and they make all the different fragrances for us, and that company makes fragrance for kitchen products, for floor polish and kitchen detergent, and they make fragrance for everybody.
I was sort of thinking in terms of pretty fragrances, but I guess a lot of household products need to have some sort of fragrance to mask the natural.
If you go into their showroom, they've got all the product codes on. Like there's all the kitchen stuff, the detergents and all that sort of stuff all over the wall, but they make fragrances. But essentially it's a compound. It's not an essential oil, because if it was essential oil, it costs thousands of dollars.
Karl, thanks so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure, and I've learnt so much more about candles than I knew before. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Thank you very much.